start the session.
Yes. Welcome, guys. Welcome, Jaiveer. Welcome, Arjun. Thank you, Harsh. So the way the session will go is I'll introduce the speakers, and then we'll have a moderated discussion, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for the audience. So to introduce, Arjun Handa is the Vice Chairman and MD of Claris Group. He's an MBA from Northeastern University, Boston, and holds a Bachelor's of Commerce degree in accounting from Ethel College of Commerce, Ahmedabad. He likes to focus on people, entrepreneurship, and management quality. He would like to add value to the lives of people in the world through his businesses and investments and contribute to society by creating opportunities for people in the fields of sports and culture. Arjun took Claris in 2007 from a small family business and grew it into a global specialty injectables company in the pharmaceutical industry, generating a value of over $1 billion and generating significant value for shareholders. He has had the experience of doing a private equity infusion, an IPO, 3 strategic deals, including a JV, and finally, a delisting of Claris. All his strategic deals of value creation have been with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Under Arjun's leadership, Claris received 8 times in a row the Great Place to Work award and was featured numerous times in Fortune India, the Next 500, Business Standard 1000, India Inc. Innovative 100 list, and many more. He has been recognized for his entrepreneurial and leadership qualities by the Economic Times Promising Entrepreneurs of India in 2016, Asia Pacific Entrepreneurship Award in 2016, in Most Promising category by Enterprise Asia, to name a few. He is now focusing on building Abalone, a Abalone Waste to Energy that does waste management, plastic recycling, and focuses on circularity. As part of his gratitude, he invests and mentors entrepreneurs and startups to take India forward. Apart from his work, Arjun is an avid art collector. He likes to read books on entrepreneurship and management. He's a car and technology freak and has a deep interest in world music. He was also a professional football player at one point. Welcome, Arjun. Our next panelist is Jaiveer Johal. Jaiveer Johal is an MSc in Global Politics from the London School of Economics and holds an undergraduate degree in economics with distinction from Loyola College, University of Madras. He has been a keen collector of modern and contemporary Indian art, including textile art for the past decade, and has a keen interest in decorative arts of South India and the Deccan in particular. Within this field, the keystone of his collecting has been the Vijayanagara Empire, as they speak not only to his personal taste, but also to the confluence of cultures of the north and south of the country, which is also a personal confluence of his spending the first half of his life in Delhi and the second half in his chosen home of Chennai. In the pursuit of his passion, he has not only collected examples of ancient art spanning from Gandhara to the Nayaka, but also worked with ateliers and craftsmen for the revival and upgradation of traditional skills in the field of woodwork and textile design to make them more relevant to the modern Indian home and the international market. He serves as a patron of the Delhi Contemporary Art Week, the Madras Art Weekend, the Chennai Photo Biennale, and other art organizations. In his professional life, he runs the Johal Logistics Group, a 200 crore plus company with interests in automotive logistics and contract manufacturing, apart from serving on the board of startups in the clean energy sector. In addition, as a matter of personal improvement, he's pursuing a program in Indian aesthetics from Gnan Prabha, Mumbai. Welcome, Jaiveer, and thank you to the both of you for being here. My first question would be to Arjun. Arjun, what got you hooked on to collecting art?
So, yeah, thanks for the intro and this platform. I think, so I've always interested in art, but never got the opportunity, chance, didn't have the mindset, didn't have the resources to really explore this area. So I think once there was enough time available for me to sort of go around, understand what I wanted, what I really liked, I started buying art. I always had a fascination for arts while I was sort of growing up. And so, yeah, I mean, somewhere it was always there deep down. I just was looking for an opportune moment to come out, which was the right phase of life to sort of delve, get into. So yeah, that's how sort of my entry into art came.
Do you remember your first purchase by any chance?
I do. It was a very small painting, very sort of moderately priced. It was
Okay.
actually one or two came as a gift, and then I probably uh, ventured into buying a couple. It was a very sort of amateur exploration into how it felt into buying art. I didn't even know whether it was art or it was just a rudimentary painting, no clue. But yeah.
All right. Thank you. Jaiveer, what about you? What got you hooked onto art collecting?
For as long as I can remember, I've always been a collector of bits and bobs and ends. So I think it will be very difficult for me to answer what I first bought. Maybe a painting I might remember, but what I first started collecting was rather interesting. It was rescuing furniture, because I grew up in a Corbusier designed house in Chandigarh. I rather spent most of my summers there. And kids, we used to spend Lodi there, and they used to break the furniture up and use it for kindling, the Pierre Yondre furniture. And I remember rescuing those because I really liked it. And my grandmother's like, if you like it so much, you can have it. Right. So I remember that being something that I remember requesting my cousin to transport a table for me from the house in Chandigarh back to Delhi. So I think that particularly is a memory. But I've collected maps, I've collected silver, I've collected things that I could afford at the point of time, and things that fascinate me. So my style of collecting generally is quite aesthetic based, which means that I ask myself two very simple questions, which is, do I like it and can I afford it? Right. Usually the answer has to be yes to both, because I may like lots of things that I can't afford, and I may be able to afford a lot of things that I don't like. So the confluence of the two pretty much answer the question about how I collect.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jaiveer. So Arjun, how does your collecting pattern sort of emerge? What do you look for? Do you have like a specific strategy that you follow?
So actually, no. Actually, what happened was I started collecting over maybe WhatsApp photos or emails, and a large portion of my collection is not from like a real gallery, where I go stand in front of it, look at it. Nothing of that sort. There was just this one fine day I decided कि boss art लेना है, and after that, obviously Harsh was there. He introduced me to a lot of art, and otherwise I would just get emails from the galleries that I would have visited when I was traveling, but never bought anything. I would get emails from Harsh, from a couple of other people, and I have just bought off art from a printout. So I just used to take prints of these emails. They would have details of size, artists, etc. I would just take a look at it, and just intuitively, all my decisions of buying art has been a couple of seconds based. It's all feel based. It's all emotions based. It's all intuition, sort of gut based, and never. Yeah, I mean, I did not even understand for a very long time what art strategy is. By masters, by emerging, by abstract, by contemporary. For the first 4-5 years, I had no clue whether, of the format of art, the types of art, the format of buying, how to build a collection. Never thought about it, never ventured into it. Didn't even buy art as an investment. I bought art as an emotion, basically. I saw something, I felt something, I wanted it around me, and that's why I bought it. Obviously, I think, as Jaiveer said, you should be able to afford it. It has to be at the right price, etc. So obviously, within that range, I just used to sort of buy out of printouts, and yeah, that would be it. And sometimes the art would come, and I wouldn't even take a look at it for a couple of months because I would be busy. And then one weekend, I would take 2 days off and just start looking at all the art and trying to place it somewhere, within the house or the farmhouse or whatever. So yeah, it's been a very emotional, intuitive, very raw, primal approach to doing it is what I have now learned after I have understood a little bit of, different strategies work around art.
Jaiveer,
Yeah,
please.
if I can come in for a quick second, I'd be very interesting to know what he collects. Like I heard a lot about what the printout is, but I haven't had an idea. Maybe from the profile was a little bit more business oriented. So it would be fun to understand, maybe also for the audience, what his collecting interests are, what leans towards the contemporary or the moderns, or how it works.
So, Jaiveer, good question. Naturally I buy either humans or animals, is what now I have understood. And that too, once Harsh pointed out to me, you do these two things, and that's when I understood. Otherwise, yeah, I don't like abstract at all. And yeah, it's largely human, animals, and I don't know, maybe Harsh can opine because he would understand the art language more, but
I think it has been more figurative based, and to give a few names, it's quite a wide spectrum of what Arjun has collected. From contemporaries, it would be like Iranna to Ganesh Gohen to who's this Dhananjay Singh, to foreign artists like Orlinsky, Venkat Botsa. It's like, I think probably he has got a collection of more than maybe 200 different artists, contemporary, and maybe more than 1,000 artworks. So it's all, I can't even kind of, it's a struggle to remember all the names. I'm just kind of telling you.
Just as a reference point, so I can understand.
Correct.
The mind. I think abstract is a taste which one either acquires or one doesn't, and it's very, very personal.
Right.
Sorry, back to you, Satyajit. Sorry, just wanted to kind of when he talks about his art, I just wanted to picture what it was in my mind's eye. That's all.
Yeah. No, so I think both of you've mentioned this conversation also in terms of, and you sort of pushed it in that direction, Jaiveer, that it has to always at the end of the day, there's also a price factor that one is sort of thinking of at the back of the mind when you're looking at a lot of works, because you specifically also it's very evident from your bio as well, and we've spoken briefly. You collect a lot of antiquities as that was one of the first places that you sort of began from. So what kind of things started driving you to look at antiquities, and what was that kind of what was the final decision based on? There is, of course, there's an emotive aspect, of course there's a financial aspect, but what's the most important thing that you value when you're considering a purchase?
See, I think it has to be the thing that is valued the most by any stretch of the imagination, has to be the emotion of a work, right? I am not collecting either from a purely investment perspective of maximizing return, or from a perspective of building a museum or an institutional collection. Because when you do that, then you need to fill the gaps, and your kind of strategy of how you collect, what you collect becomes very different, right? So when you're collecting from the easiest way I could put it is from a personal self-fulfillment perspective, the emotive aspect of the work has to be primary. There is no other way around it, right? That having been said, I think what one needs to do, as with any other skill that is acquired, and I think building a collection is a skill. One needs to read, one needs to listen, and one needs to speak at the right times with the right people, right? So I think for me has been very important, that one kind of understands the context of the piece that you're acquiring, right? So if you're talking about a Gandhara head, right? I mean, it's a figurative work, but it's also very important in terms of the social history of North India, right? So you kind of place the object in its sense. And the other thing which I laugh and say is that all our best thoughts have been stolen by the ancients. So if you even look at contemporary art, look at Iranna, for example, but you'll see the same kind of motifs which go through, which have been present through millennia of South Asian art. And I collect only South Asian art, so I may have some limited knowledge from walking through museums in the West, but I don't have any kind of in-depth expertise at all on the Western canon. So those things, kind of it'll start making sense to you when you look at enough things that there is a thread of Indian aesthetics which completely link millennia-old civilization to today. And when that works out, then in your head, in your space, in your sensibility, certain works, certain objects, certain paintings will make sense automatically, right? So we may also call it emotion, but behind that, there is this intuitive sense of what is a sense of your aesthetic.
Your journey also, and just a sort of follow-up to that, because your journey is also because as a collector has begun from antiquities to now modern and contemporary as well. Any unexpected challenges or surprises on the way in terms of discovery?
Challenges of collecting antiquities are much vaster than the challenges of collecting modern and contemporary art. Collecting modern and contemporary art is actually a cakewalk compared to the kind of perils that one faces on a daily basis while collecting or attempting to collect antiquities in this country. We have the most antiquated law, which doesn't help, where you can be in violation of the law for having moved up a painting or an object one floor up or down, technically, right? So it's a very, very antiquated law. That being said, the knowledge of either experts in the field or what is available publicly in terms of trying to sift out the fakes from the real deal is also very limited. So it's overall a very challenging area that one gets involved in, and it requires a lot more intensive reading and application of mind than, say, I would say modern or contemporary art does, because there, if you're buying from, say, Harssh, or you're buying from Saffron Art or Pandols or whatever, they've already done your provenance checks and all of those things have been done. And the antiquities are a little bit more difficult in that sense. And a lot of the times, because of the law and not being registered, you just don't buy things, even though you may love it. But particularly where I live, my city is a little sensitive to this particular area. So that's where it is. So the challenges are immense in antiquities, which is also one of the reasons over the last 6 or 7 years, I have moved away, unfortunately, from collecting antiquities, or if I do so, I collect them overseas rather than buying them in India.
Okay.
Wouldn't you agree that, Jaiveer, that even with the modern, that space, a lot of things, the provenance, you can never be too sure. In the news, you read, kind of crazy stuff like, one of the works sold by Sotheby's bought by one of these Saudi billionaires, turning out to be a fake. So we are talking about millions of dollars worth of art here.
No, absolutely. See, that's the thing, right? And unfortunately, we're back into a situation where unless you've seen the work being painted yourself, right? Sure. It becomes very difficult. At some point, you need to believe the processes that are followed by either dealers or by the auction houses, which is why I think in the collecting of art, I don't use the term curator. I use the term that I like to use is Sherpa. I think it becomes very important, particularly for a younger collector to have the right Sherpa to kind of guide you into the direction that you want to go. Right, that's why it's not a curator. I make the distinction here, right? Because what ends up happening is when you have an external curator is that they guide you to the direction they want to go. But this is your collecting, and then what ends up happening is when you hire too many outside experts, you lose interest in it because they're collecting for themselves. You're paying for it, right? So what you need is that right kind of guide or Sherpa, which will take you up the mountain, make you avoid the perils. But the summit is yours to climb, right? The climb is still yours. It's not theirs.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting thing that you pointed out, because that's also a stance. I've had the opportunity to do some amount of work with a bunch of museums in Southeast Asia. One of the biggest challenges is also that where, the curators come in with a very different trajectory from, the larger museum administration or the larger institutional conversations. So institutional curation then becomes a very different challenge. And of course, in terms of private spaces, it's all the more different altogether. So Arjun, my question, the same question that I asked Jaiveer actually. What were the unexpected challenges or surprises that you encountered? Because your process also, as you mentioned, it's quite different, right? Like most of what you've bought is not really from like a physical gallery going and acquiring it. So when you do that kind of a transaction through images, through phone conversations and emails, what were the challenges for you?
So, frankly, I think the only challenge that I faced was, is that the right price? Because I was not buying somebody very, very famous. I was not buying somebody that was very pricey, where you needed certification or authenticity or whatever. So I don't think it was a lot of challenge. I mean, for quite frankly, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I'm just ticking off things and I'm buying and stuff is coming. And, it's either framed or packaged or whatever. So the only challenge was, am I going to like it? I'm buying it off of a printout. Am I going to like it or I'm not going to like it? And I think I liked about 80-90% of the things that I bought off like that. So I guess the challenge was price and am I going to like it or not? And fortunately, the emotion that came out of seeing the printout was the same emotion, a little bit more enhanced when I saw it in real life. And to tackle the price challenge, what I did was I would not like really negotiate, but I would quote a price that I thought was okay to pay for such a painting. So imagine I got a quote for, let's say, I don't know, 4 lakh rupees. So I would send a Samne quote at 1 lakh rupees. I'm like, I don't believe this is more than 1 lakh. And sometimes the deal would go through at 1.5, 2. Sometimes it wouldn't go through. So that's how I countered the price challenge. I didn't start negotiating. I didn't start getting emotionally invested in the painting. The key goal I told myself is, I don't know anything about art. I don't know anything about pricing. I don't know anything about artists too. God knows which artist is this, what is he making, what am I buying. I did not even understand it's, there's canvas, there's ink, there's charcoal. I had no clue. I wasn't looking at materiality. I wasn't looking at substances used or whatever. I was just looking at how I was feeling, looking at that art. And so I countered the price challenge by quoting a price that I felt was okay for me to pay. The price that I could afford to buy that painting and look at it. I did not get into the thought processes of online kitna price hai, do dealer kitna bolte hai. I consciously decided on a couple of paradigms before I went into art. I decided that I will not build knowledge. I will not give time. I will not try to know the artist's story behind making that painting. I just decided that this is for me and I will buy it if I can. And that's it. So, and that made life actually very, very easy and simple for me. So I would get a quote. I would reply back with a quote. If the dealer agreed, I would buy it. If they didn't agree, I would let it go. I never got into, and I never looked at a painting for more than a couple of seconds. And I never re-looked at it. It was not something that, acha, mujhe kharidna hai, and then I take a photo and then I use the brochure and then I keep looking at it. And then I put it in against my sofa wall and thinking, yahan kaisa lagega? I had no clue where I was going to put this. So basically, I was buying something that I liked, but I didn't need. Right? And therefore, I never thought, yaar, ye to lena hi hai, or I want this and it's so awesome and it makes me feel so good. A lot of the other things that I buy, I get invested in it. But this is what, because of the lack of exposure, I decided that I'm not going to get emotionally invested in it. So it was very, very easy for me to let go. If the price didn't make sense, theek hai, jana do, kya farak padta hai? It's not such a big deal. And the other...
I'm exactly the opposite. They're like exes. I remember every single word that got away.
that's why we've been brought together, right?
Also, it's
We
it's
have
an
both different points
it's an
of view.
interesting mix of collectors. Like the patterns are so different. So that is what was more interesting here because like more variety onto the panel in that sense.
No, absolutely. It's very interesting because so for me, my thought has always been, and this is speaking to other collectors, friends, good art, exceptional art is always a stretch. It's never affordable right across the bat because the seller also knows what he has, right? And you want it. So what ends up happening is that with exceptional pieces of work, you will have to pay that little bit extra that you don't want to. But over a period of time, I think that doesn't matter. And B, you will have something that you will love and cherish. So yes, so for me, I think in that sense, I think I'm very emotionally invested in how I collect, and I as I can tell you, I can count on the fingers of my hand the works which I let go and I regret because sometimes it was a lakh of rupees and a 2 lakh rupee difference, and you were like, ego said, "Nahi, maine itna bola, to main itna hi dunga." So right. So I think I've become a little bit more lenient with myself since then. But back to one of the ways that of negotiation, I think Mittal Saab used to do this in Hyderabad, Jagdish Mittal, and he used to tell the dealers that, boss, give me one price. मैं यहाँ हाँ बोलूंगा ना बोलूंगा. There is no negotiation. You do what is the best you can do. If I want it, I will say yes, you'll have the payment. If you say no, I will walk away. Right. So what that does is it cuts short all of this back and forth of no 5 lakhs, no 4 lakhs, no 3 lakhs, nahi sir 2500 kar dijiye. You do the best you can. After that, no regret for you, no regret for me. And I think that also cuts down the clutter in one's own head about collecting, because this can take a lot of time and effort. We also have normal, regular businesses to run, which have to pay for all of this.
So I think a major distinction here that I would like to highlight, though you don't buy Jaiveer art as an investment, but your buying pattern is mostly to deal with antiquities and modern. Now that by effect, are falling into that investment zone, whereas contemporary, you don't know after 30 years what is going to happen, what is not going to happen. So a primal difference here between your collection pattern and Arjun's is because Arjun never dwells into the modern side of it. He just doesn't like to, for several reasons. So when it's contemporary, you're buying everything. There's so much of supply in the market from so many artists, and that's why probably there's a distinction in the acquisition process.
Absolutely. But then the one thing which I find interesting about Arjun's collecting mechanism is because most contemporary collectors that I know tend to collect in depth and across breadth, right? Whereas from what I understand is that if they particularly like an artist's work, then they kind of buy the genres of that artist, say a contemporary artist who worked for 10 years, early works, current works, future works. They tend to buy that breadth of works across the linear timeline, as it were. And they also tend to buy depth of work. So they tend to buy several works of the same artist, right? And which is how you kind of, which is the usual style of kind of collecting contemporaries that I have witnessed amongst my friends. So this is a very interesting way of looking at it, where you're kind of buying the breadth of the market rather than buying the breadth of an artist. So it's quite refreshing because that also makes your house look different rather than,
Having said that, he also has got breadth of various artists also, because there's so much that has been collected. So but yeah, there's the prime distinction here is contemporary versus antiques. Or
I do collect contemporary, and honestly, my contemporary collecting then becomes the artist's journey, because the whole what gives me a kick when I collect contemporary, and I do collect a fair bit of contemporary, is following the artist on their journey. Right. So then I would like to know the artist. I'd like to meet them. I'd like to go to the studio. I'd like to have an understanding of their milieu, because that for me is something that I cannot do with a Padamsee or a Souza or a Ram Kumar, but I could do that with a Baran or a Shilpa Gupta still, right? I mean, if I had the access, right? So that makes a huge difference for me. For then is the investment is into the artist as much as it is into the art.
Sure. So so the whole idea of this learning initiative also subconsciously is that there are very few people as collectors who get so invested into the process of collecting and the knowledge behind it, which you have, Jaiveer. A lot of people, they kind of, it's more of an instinct based kind of acquisition. And while people would like to understand these processes or the science behind acquisition, there is no proper format where people have access to that knowledge, information, or a peer group where people can get together and kind of, bounce ideas off each other. And that's where, by these initiatives, what is going to happen, or what we aim that happens, is that people are more informed, basically.
Absolutely. I've burnt 7 fingers and 5 toes in this. So I can tell you that from personal experience.
I
Excellent.
think Harsh, what you're saying is true, that either people buy art when they're building a new house, or their interior designer takes them along, or they've always wanted to buy art, but they're very hesitant because of the lack of exposure or knowledge. How do I go about it? What's the strategy? What do I do? And there, I think, as Satyajit was asking, how do you overcome the challenges? I think one of the other ways that I also overcome the challenges is I bought in bulk. So I bought cheap, I bought in bulk, and I didn't care whether I got it or not. So just the idea is to like take a plunge, right? So if somebody wants to buy art or get into art, just take a plunge. I mean, you want to start going to the gym, you have to first show up, right? First go. So पहले ले लो, कुछ तो ले लो, मतलब whatever you can. And I think that that takes you on your own personal inroad in terms of exploring yourself on what do you like, what do you want, what's the process that gives you the maximum comfort to buy.
Yeah. I have a question for the two of you, and Harsh, then I'll have to step out for a bit. I'm sorry, there's some unexpected work that's come about. But considering the patterns, both of you have very, very different collecting patterns, right? Like we've established that. But based on this, how do you, Arjun, do you engage with the art community apart from the collecting bit? Or if you do, and how do you do that?
I don't engage a lot. I will go to some fairs, and when I'm traveling, I will go to some galleries just to take a look at it. And that's also very, very recent. No, I think it's a very, very deep field, very wide field, and it's a never-ending, I think, journey. So I'm not too keen into getting to know the artists or attending all the fairs, because then my insatiability creeps up and it comes in, and then you want to buy a lot of things, and then you need a warehouse.
What's wrong with that? It's a good thing to buy a lot of things and have a warehouse.
And then you don't have enough places to put. So I curtailed myself one fine day and said, if I have a place to put art, only then I'm going to buy it. Otherwise, I'm not going to buy it, or I'll start recycling it. Otherwise, it's just going to be a big go down full of art. Good art needs to be seen. It needs to be felt. It needs to be appreciated. And, unless you're supporting an artist or a cause and you want to pay the artist more money by buying more painting, that's another story. You can store that painting, but otherwise, good art needs to come out. So, yeah, I didn't feel the need to engage a lot because it's a never-ending field, and then your tastes start getting more expensive. You start buying more expensive art. You start understanding masters, then you want to buy that. And I don't think my real reason of getting into art was the thud-up, the pain, the artist's sort of energy in the art. It was never about showing myself or creating an identity through it, or making a good looking sort of house or space, showing off that you have masters. I don't think that was my sort of objective of getting into art. And so I refrained myself from getting into too many of the expensive sort of artists. And so I keep my sort of interaction limited. If I'm in a mood to buy, I'll go around, I'll look, and I'll buy. And then sometimes work keeps me very busy, and maybe I won't buy for like a year or two.
All right. Jaiveer, what about you? In terms of, again, like, how do you engage with the art world apart from just the buying bit or the collecting bit of it?
Right.
And what are the ways, what are the avenues that you look at?
So I live in Madras, so that having been, I hope I'm audible and not stuck. Yeah. I think Satyajit is stuck for a second. Yeah. So I live in Chennai. So that is works in and out of favor in two ways. It works out of favor because we really don't have access to galleries across the road. But what works in favor is then you make a conscious choice of how much you wish to engage and how much you wish not to engage. Because if you're in Bombay or Delhi and I have a home in Delhi, and when I'm there, then it also becomes like a social obligation if there's a gallery opening or whatever, and it's friends, so you end up showing up. So I already enjoy the process of interacting with both gallerists as well as artists. It gives me a lot of pleasure to have myriad conversations with these people, and some of them have become both on the gallery side and on the artist side very, very close friends over a period of time. So I treasure those interactions deeply because they have added not only meaningfully to how I collect, but they've added meaningfully to my life period, right? One of my closest friends today is someone who I met who used to manage me as a client at an auction house. So over a period of buying for years and years and years, we've ended up becoming such good friends that I gave her a ring the day the auction was closing, wanting to bid on something. She says, "Don't you know I'm at work?" I said, "Yes, don't you know I'm your client?" So things like that, right? So I do wish to engage. I engage on multiple levels. I do try to make it for the fairs. There is only one in India, and there's now one in Bombay, which we were talking about just before Arjun joined in. In Bombay, I'll be there. I do try to make it for a couple of the auctions because the room is interesting and it's fun, even if I'm not necessarily buying, and then you get to meet people. Personally, I think the best is being able to walk through a gallery on your own, which is what I like doing best. Not an opening day, not a gala where you're air kissing for the next half an hour, but just whenever I go to Bombay or Delhi, I take a day out and I'll just walk through the galleries. And I think that is very interesting for me because then you kind of look at the works in peace, and you also mostly bang into the gallerist there, and then you can have a chat in peace. So I think that engagement I do enjoy. When I was a little bit more younger, I used to enjoy the parties a lot more. I think now they are a little bit more of a pain than anything else. But occasionally I will not deny that I do also enjoy the art parties.
Yeah. Especially the ones in Delhi.
Always.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm so sorry. I'll have to step out for a bit. There's something else that has just come up. Harsh, I'd request you to please take over.
Sure.
And hope to connect very shortly. Thanks.
Thank you, Satyajit.
So my like what Arjun just said, that he just took a plunge, literally, and that was his advice to other collectors. Like don't think so much. Of course, it's a daunting world out there, but just taking a plunge helps you kind of find your own way. So the question is that, having taken the plunge, of course, you did realize over a period of time that you made certain right choices and certain wrong choices, and the question basically is that, how did your decision making or your art collection practice evolve over time? And what did you learn from these kind of mistakes? And how has that helped you now take a future decision, kind of a thing?
I think, as you go along, your tastes start to become finer, or you start becoming more aware of what you like, what you don't like. So in the past, if I would have probably bought 5 paintings that were similar, now I will diversify the buying diversity of the paintings and not try to buy a lot of things that are similar. Stuff like that. I think I still believe that taking the plunge is the best thing, but instead of buying several things together, maybe buy single pieces at a time, so that you can narrow down and you can really ask yourself which is the one that you like,
Right.
Which is the one that interests you more. And so I think I've learned to have a harder conversation with myself in terms of narrowing down and deciding which is the art piece that is the most interesting to me at that time, or the most impactful to me at that time. So yeah, and I think as I've also learned to understand a little bit of how do I put it, more finished art than as compared to sort of raw art. So because I've always wanted to be supportive of emerging artists, I've always wanted to be the art patron who is encouraging newer artists to go along, even if that artwork is not that I would say finished or sophisticated or high up there. I feel better when I'm buying a, a raw art as compared to a more sort of finished art. But as you go along, you naturally tend to, I mean, I've naturally wanted to buy a little bit more finished art now, which has a lot of, obviously, it has to have the rawness, the primal instinct, the meaning. But I guess more sophisticated or more finished sort of art pieces can also give you that feel. Where earlier I felt, the rawer the art, the more unfinished the art, the better it is. So yeah, these are a couple of sort of thought processes, migrations in the journey.
And it's a very valuable piece of lesson and an advice both, because in India, in the contemporary world, unfortunately, our artists don't really give so much of importance to kind of the finishing aspect of an artwork, especially when it comes to sculptures or installations or even like a canvas. Whereas and especially you have this experience because you have been divulging into buying international artworks of people who are kind of quite popular in the West. And of course, they kind of, it's like a classic Jeff Koons or an Orlinsky kind of a finish compared to a finish of an artwork that you see from an artist coming from India. So I always have this uphill struggle mentoring artists, saying that how important is it? I would say that if 50% of your time is spent in making art, the other 50% should go in finishing it and making it world class, because we are no longer competing against Ahmedabad to Ahmedabad or Ahmedabad to Bombay or Ahmedabad to Delhi, where the world is open. People can go anywhere on through Instagram and buy anything, and the access is huge. So unfortunately, it's a process. People are still not yet there, I would say, at least in the Indian art scene in that sense. So quite agreed to that. Jaiveer, what are your thoughts on the same question? How have you evolved, and whatever the
I think one of the most important things that you need to do is set yourself a budget. And I think that's very important. I mean, the budget can be extremely large or extremely small or whatever it is, that's individual, but set yourself a budget and say, this is what I'm going to spend. Then once you've done that, then don't be afraid to spend 90% of that budget on one work.
Correct.
Right? No one is saying spend more. So you want to spend a crore. Okay, that is your budget. Your budget is 10 lakhs. Then don't be afraid to buy a work for 9 lakh rupees or 95 lakh rupees, depending on what your budget is, because then you will get that one superlative work. What I have done, and this is a mistake that I made, and I sometimes still do it because I have a shopping problem, is that you'll buy works for 2 lakhs, 1 lakh, 50,000, 80,000. What ends up happening is you don't realize at the end of the day, you've totaled it up to a good sum. And then you look at a work that you really desire, or you look at a work that is a master, and you say, nahi, main master nahi kharidta hu, bahut mehenga hai, kyunki wo 50 lakh ka hai. But I've bought 50 lakh rupees of art in the last 6 months because I spent 2 lakhs here and 3 lakhs there and 4 lakhs there. So make a budget, stick to it, and then don't be afraid to spend that budget on the one work that you're in love with. Right? So that, I think, for me, is over a period of time, I've kind of devised into that strategy that it doesn't matter if it's expensive, quote unquote, as long as there is value in it and it fits into your budget. Then you don't buy smaller works of art for 6 months or 8 months or even a year. Like I've gone a whole year without having bought anything significant because I'd bought a Gaitonde watercolor, right? So I didn't buy anything significant after that for a while because it just didn't make sense for me to buy anything significant. My budget was exhausted. But am I extremely happy with that work? Yes, I'm extremely happy with that work. So things like that, I mean, it also depends intuitively on how you are as a person, etc. But for me, make a budget, stick to it, but then don't be afraid to spend the budget.
So getting back to your Gaitonde example, how it's okay, express to me the feeling that you get when when a work of art that you have really bought because you loved it, number one, and then it is exponentially growing in value. I'm sure it kind of, I just want to understand because, and this applies to even Arjun, if I put in context of Raghava KK's works, where, we bought quite a significant chunk of his collection. And of course, Sotheby's then kind of, his performance at the auction was excellent in that sense. So like, what is the feeling that you get and how does that affect your further kind of decisions for collecting art in future?
See, there's two things here, right? I'll be extremely honest about this. One is that you feel that slight high about the validation of one's eye, right?
Sure.
More than anything else, right? So it's like, I knew this before other people knew it, right? You get that.
So that's a tremendous ego boost, right?
That's a tremendous ego boost. But at the same time, if you ask me, the second thing is, I always remind myself, a great work of art that you love is like the home you live in. It doesn't matter what its value grows to. You're not going to sell your house and live on the street. You're not going to sell this work because you love it. So it is all notional. भाई आपको दिमाग में लगता है मैंने 50 का लिया अब 200 का हो गया 500 का हो गया. As long as you're in love with the work, it is all notional. So it is more, for me personally, it is about the validation of one's eye that you found something which other people then
Correct.
Realized had some value in it, right? So that's about it. But that's a momentary high. I mean, it's not it's not something. It doesn't trigger me to buy more in that sense. It does make me feel good, but it's not. It's a momentary high.
Sure. What about you, Arjun?
So I think I have never looked at how much my art piece is appreciating. I mean, I don't even know how to do that. So I don't take any high from the investment appreciation piece, but I do get a high when you buying a signature piece or from a sort of a famous artist. And it is really very impactful. I mean, these the larger artists and whatever kind of big art or sculpture that they're creating, it really has some impact on you. You feel different when you're around that art piece. That piece itself has its sort of its own energy and impact on you when you're sort of looking at it. I think that gives me a tremendous high. For me, that's like an inspiration. So when you look at something very good, you really get inspired to do better, right? So I mean, that's how at least I feel. So having like a signature art piece around from somebody very, very sort of proven, famous, etc., looking at it gives me a very, very sort of inspirational feeling. As if like things are possible in life and in the world. And when you see great creativity, you are made to feel about possibilities, right? So, and that feeling of possibilities are endless. It's a very, very sort of empowering feeling to me. Everything else goes out of the window, and I feel that sab ho jayega life. Whatever you dream is possible, and the world will become awesome. So I think it's a very, very positivity-inducing journey sitting with that art piece.
So I think you seek inspiration in your non-art life through art, like which is the 99% of your life, which you're working and kind of traveling. Art kind of you is a catalyst, maybe if I'm reading you right, is a catalyst to kind of go out there and kind of get that energy through art and then kind of, or inspiration, and probably kind of go out there and perform what you need to perform. Whereas I think with Jaiveer, it's more emotional investment into the love of that particular artwork rather than the artwork throwing something back at you, and which is very, very interesting because these very, very stark opposite kind of collection patterns, and that is what makes this discussion also interesting. Is we have got two people at very, very different sides of the equation. So I think more or less we guys are done here with today's session. It was great having both of you. I would like to kind of throw it out to the audience if they have any questions. please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. Start your video. Please feel free to do that. Okay, Virti, why don't you start? I can see you raising your hand.
Yes. Hi. Hello. So my name is Viti, and I'm an artist. I'm an amateur artist based from Indore. I have been painting since some time. It's been years, but then the thing is, I have never put my art out in the market, or I've shown it to people who are close to me, but never really put it out in the market and for sale or something. So I just wanted to ask, what could be my first step, or if you could guide me somehow as to how I can reach collectors, or how I can put my art forward. Basically how I can reach out to the market.
So
What could be my first step?
it's a very open-ended question, and I can we can have a 2-hour discussion over this to answer. What I would rather say that the best way to do is, first of all, kind of shape your career up well. Have a gallery association. If your gallery doesn't find you, there are other avenues to go and reach out to the world and show your practice. Have solo shows or group exhibitions. There is no way a collector would really like them being spammed
Hmm.
by artists' emails or Instagram requests. So there's a channel, there's a way to go
Okay.
about it, and once you follow that and your work speaks to a collector, the collector will come looking out for you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Great. So I see questions from Bhavish. Bhavish, do you want to kind of take a lead and ask your question yourself?
Hi Harsh, and hi Jaiveer, hi Arjun. Um, I had one question. I had messaged about the same. So I wanted to check with you all three. Like, when you are planning to buy an artwork, uh, do you want to go by the meaning that the artwork is presenting to you personally, or would you like to explore from the artist's thought process, what he thought the work was about, and what his journey was while making this work? Because both of the things are valid. You could be just concerned about how it makes you feel, or what your thought process is, because this could be convoluting thoughts, or would it be both? Like, you want to know your perspective as well as the artist's perspective before buying. That's my question.
Arjun, would you like to answer that?
Sure. So I most of the times I go by what I am feeling and inferring personally, because I'm going to live with that art. I need to know if I am feeling right about it, and if my interpretations and thoughts are going to sort of resonate with that piece, because it's going to be around me all the time. But I'd love to know the artist's thought too. I think there's a lot of energy that the artist adds, and there's a story. There's always a context. I'd love to understand that. However, it has, even after understanding that, uh, it has to appeal to me for me to really sort of conclude on a feeling or an interpretation before I would buy.
Jaiveer, your thoughts on this question?
I think for once, Arjun and I are in complete agreement. So I think I pretty much look at it the same way. To take an example, I have a Geev Patel that hangs in my bedroom. And when I had a conversation with Geev, I said, that looks like a mother and child to me in the right-hand corner. I said, no, it's just a woman crouching over. It's not a mother and child. But I said, looks like a mother and child to me. So every time I look at it, I still look at it as a mother and child, even though Geeve has been very clear and said that it's not a mother and child. It is just a figure of a crouching figure. It's called Footboard Riders at Night. So it's a scene of a train on the inside. But it is what it is to me. So yes, I think though I'm very interested in what the artist has to say, at the end of the day, I'm might be quite narcissistic, but I'm more interested in what I feel. So
Fair enough. Whatever works for you, right?
I'm cutting the check.
Right.
So
Thank you
there's
so
a,
much. That makes much more sense. Yeah.
there's a question from Rashmi and Nehal. Both of them have the same question, and maybe Arjun can throw some light on it. Can you please elaborate on the finishing aspect when you talk about like a more finished work? Can you just talk a little bit more about that, comparing a more finished work to a more unfinished work of some Indian artists compared that to a Western artist?
Yeah, so I think between finished or less finished, it's more about, I guess, it should look finished, it should feel finished, meaning it's not too raw, rough edges. I would say shapes, forms, taking a finality versus feels like work in process, or feels like a shape or a form is still in the making. So I guess it's more to do with how you feel. It's more to do with aesthetics. Yeah, I mean, some Western artists will use machines and other tools to finish the art piece, versus artists in India may not have access to it, or we are just still emerging as a nation for art. So maybe people are still sort of wanting to do everything by hand, by paint, by themselves, without sort of taking any kind of external intervention or help to set up the sculpture or the painting. But it's like, it's really like a work in process shoe versus a finished shoe, or it's like, work in process shirt versus a finished shirt, you feel it's done with more detailing, more, I would say, shine, more matte finish, more finality to the artwork, as compared to it feeling that it's still in process and it could have been honed more.
So to add to what Arjun is saying, it's a mindset thing also. In India, we don't have, the art schools don't teach us the importance of finishing. There's this whole movement led by these Western artists where these artwork, like even if you look at Anish Kapoor, or even if you look at Subodh's works, the way they are finished, because they are made in foundries, maybe in Geneva or maybe in China or some other place where there is a huge amount of money gone into production of these works, and there is a large base of collectors out there who are seeking this, and of course, and hence more and more such works are coming into the market. The whole idea for, or rather the takeaway for artists, is that you have to invest in finishing. You don't need to make it glossy and glamorous and gold and silver. Whatever little work of art, whatever humble your expression is, make it the best finishing possible, even with a canvas, the way you stretch it, the way you kind of finish your canvas. So many things, like just get inspiration from the best artist who is like your role model, and try and emulate to their practice and give that finishing, is what the message overall is.
Can I come in here? And I think I don't understand this. Every work speaks for itself. There are certain works which need to be finished in a certain way, and there are certain works which don't need to be finished.
Correct.
So I think going into this direction of saying we're not buying a car here कि matte finish है, gloss finish है, इसका leather का stitching ठीक है कि नहीं ठीक है, right? I work in the auto sector, so we do this all the time for a living, checking trim, right?
Correct.
So I think I have a very, very different take on this. That having been said, I think a lot of it is also galleries cheaping out. How many times does a gallery wish to invest in putting museum glass on a watercolor? I would say 9 out of 10 times no. Right? That is not the artist's fault. Every single time I bought a work from a gallery, I've had, and this is from the topmost galleries in the country, right? And here we're talking about a 6 by 8 inch watercolor for which I paid 5.5 lakh rupees. It still came with an acrylic glass, right? So let's not just talk about the artists here. The framing, the interventions on framing, the interventions on what kind of glass to use, the interventions on display, that is where the gallerist has to come in. That is not the artist's area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that is where I think a lot of the times the galleries cheap out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think there's also a learning, not just for the artists, but also for the gallerists on how this is done. Right. I think something very simple as when Kermold Collab did Gurjeet's show, just painting those pedestals pink elevated the work beyond. Right. Now, that is something which was an investment done by the gallery. They took the trouble to paint the pedestals pink. So I this whole finishing aspect is very subjective on the work. Now, KG's toy is by no stretch of imagination finished, but it is still extremely important in the oeuvre of what it is. But yes, if an Anish reflective kind of work is unfinished, it would obviously not work. So I'm not being able to kind of gather what's being said here.
So the message here is very clear that if you give it your 2000% in whatever medium you're working on, the question is, what we are trying to say here is just don't leave it halfway, half-assed, ke ye chal jaye. Yeah. Now,
instead of making 5 works, make 3.
Correct. And the other thing is that while I was in Miami, I had a very interesting conversation with Rajiv, had flown down from New York, Rajiv Chaudhary. And he was looking at Narayan's work, and it was a solo booth of Narayan. And I was just asking for his advice. And one thing he said is that when I look at a work of art, and I don't want to see imperfections in it. Now, it's not about the finishing per se. What he's referring to is that the artist didn't have the nuance to look at it properly and find that little fault in it and rectify it. The idea was chalega. No, that's a mindset issue. That's a mindset issue. But then you have to understand that when there are thorough collectors who just kind of are real collectors out there, they look at every work in so much of minute detail that their thing is that, listen, I don't feel the artist has given 100%. I'm not convinced. It's not about whether you have kind of painted it all gold and silver and made it look like Jeff Koons. No, that's not the point. Coming to your second point, where the galleries also do play a role, I 100% agree. And this conversation I had with Rajiv also is that in India, unfortunately, we don't have the right kind of market where if I go to Basel and if I am selling my works in Basel, no one asks for a discount. There's no negotiation in the West when it comes to art. Now, the point is, in India, it's an uphill struggle for the artist, the gallery, everything. And there are too many things happening. So it's, of course, there's no idea of doing a blame game that this is right and this is wrong. Of course, a gallery has to kind of look at perfection in whatever endeavors they are doing, and so has the artist. There is no shortcut to that. The only angle here is that in India, things are not as smooth as, the West is a smoother place to operate for all these things, basically. Coming to any further questions? Yes, Ish, please go ahead and ask.
Hi, I had a question for Jaiveer, since you said you collected textile art. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
So I'm a fiber artist myself, and I was kind of curious about your thoughts as a collector. Since fiber art, I feel like isn't always put on the same pedestal, or it's not as well respected as I think, like canvas art or more traditional forms of art. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you see it becoming more like popular or more well respected in the future, or?
See, I think it will, because I think we have to evolve out of this pure play of oil on canvas being somehow superior to any other medium. I think that is changing amongst serious collectors. I think the medium is immaterial to a large extent, apart from the fact that certain materials may not have longevity, which may be a factor in consideration when you're collecting, or certain materiality in terms of humidity or weather or conditions like that will impact us. But that minor thing being set aside, I think increasingly with the sizes of one's homes becoming larger in the country, and people also evolving as collectors, I don't think the materiality is going to make much of a difference. I think Ravindra Reddy, who is one of our foremost sculptors rather, works in fiber, right? And his fiber work is as respected as his bronze work. So I don't think there is a materiality problem as such. Yes, amongst younger collectors, they tend to look at things like, oh, but fiber is a quote unquote cheap material. But I'm like, boss, how much does canvas and paint cost? Fiber probably costs more, right? So those conversations are continuing to happen, but I don't see. My advice is don't abandon a material just because you think that it's not saleable. I think materiality in the long run will not matter.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
One last question, anyone, or should we wrap up the session? Great. Oh, hold on. We have, is that a question? No, great. So, okay, guys. So thank you, Arjun, and thank you, Jaiveer. I think it was quite a interesting session. And thanks for coming and agreeing and giving your valuable insights. We'll see each other soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Arjun. Thank you,
Thank
Arjun.
you. See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.